There we go, we're live. Hello everyone, it's Dylan again for another episode on the Warrior Tribe. Today I've got Sensei Gary with me. We're sitting in Grahamstown. It's probably about 40 degrees outside, so if we start sweating, it's not because of the nerves, it's because of the heat outside. Gary is the karate sensei that I've started training under. He's a 6th Dan black belt. He's been doing karate for over 30 years now.
That's right, yes, 33 years.
33 years. Gary's also the president of United World Karate, General Karate Commission South Africa, as well as the chairperson of United Shotokan Ryu. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
Okay. Excellent. So I thought Gary's really awesome to speak to. He's taught me a lot in the few years that I've been training with him, and karate's really been a cornerstone of my recovery from my depression and my breakdown, and it's something that I almost have to go to. I've got to train with a group of people, so it's made going to training a lot easier, especially on those days where I don't feel like getting up and doing things. So Gary's very graciously allowed me to pick his brain, and he's going to answer some questions for us. So 33 years, Gary, what got you started with karate?
Dylan, I think, I started in 1985, and at the time I was 12 years of age, so it's going back a good few years. And around about that time I was pretty much involved in swimming at school, and not only at school level but also club level. And I got to a point where I really just didn't enjoy the competitive aspect of swimming any longer. And it so happened around that time, not really knowing what I wanted to do, I walked into the local corner shop, and there was an advert on the window, and I can see it quite clearly still. Advertising karate classes, and I went back to my parents, and a couple of weeks later I signed up for my first class. So that was back in 85, quite a good few years back.
And unbroken from 85?
Yes, when I did my national service, it was a little bit more difficult, but I did try and attend training at various dojo during that time, and then a lot of self-training as well, but otherwise unbroken.
Okay. And through your career of karate, your karate journey, has there been any defining moment or moment of transformation where you realized that this is something that you want to make a lifestyle out of?
I think in my case, the transformation was a slow and probably, hopefully, an ongoing process. But certainly right from the start, when I used to observe my seniors at the time, I was really impressed with the controlled manner in which they would practice, as well as their focus. And I think these things all had quite a big impact on me. And then also, karate itself is governed by a certain set of principles, which I think almost made it quite an honourable pursuit in my eyes at a young age. So these were probably things that I hope to be able to emulate one day.
Okay. And would you mind telling us about some of those principles? What are they, and how do you apply them in your day-to-day life when you're not practicing karate?
Well, to start off with, the founder of Shotokan Karate, Gichin Funakoshi Sensei, he devised 20 principles which form the cornerstone of karate practice, but these can be further simplified into 5 principles, and these basically are to strive for the perfection of character, to endeavour, to respect others, to be faithful, and to refrain from violent behaviour. So I think, irrespective of one's beliefs, that these are applicable to people all over the world, from different cultures as well as different religious backgrounds.
Interesting that there's non-violence as a principle of karate. I think a lot of the popularism for karate is it's a a style of fighting, and Gary and I were speaking earlier where karate is actually a martial art, and I think people need to focus more on the art and the lifestyle side of karate than the fighting side. So I'm glad that principle's thrown in there.
Yes.
It's not the fighting.
If maybe I can just add to that, I would agree with what you've just said, in that from an external appearance, karate seems to be very, very physical, and indeed it is physical. But I think the main principle is to try and perfect one's character through the process of rigorous training. So I think the key value lies in strengthening oneself from a mental perspective rather than just a physical sense.
Okay. And I need one of your secrets. What kept you staying on course? Like for 33 years, I've got involved with things and I found myself, like I sort of hit a peak and get to where I want and then change to something else. How did you manage to sustain 33 years of karate?
I think in my case, first of all, I have to say that karate doesn't come easily to me. And at the same time, over the years, being in a dojo has not necessarily always been a comfortable place for me. And I think a good instructor will always make it as such that it's a challenge. But certainly, I think my goals at the time were very, very attainable. And I know sometimes after a really hard training session, I would think to myself, well, maybe this is it. But somehow my feet managed to find their way back to the dojo for the next session. And the same would apply to gradings. I never had aspirations of really ever achieving a black belt. I possibly hoped, but maybe didn't always believe it was within my grasp. So I found that if I graded for yellow belt, it opened up the possibility to perhaps grading to the next level. So the progress was in small increments, perhaps, to put it. Yes.
So when we started, I remember our very first training session where you looked across at all of us and said each one of you here has the potential to be a black belt karateka, but it's going to take dedication, it's going to take training and a lot of commitment. What do you think the most common reason is that people never follow through, never achieve that dream of this? Is there something that you've identified with the students that have gone through?
I think it's really difficult to pinpoint because people start for various reasons, and obviously children have preconceived ideas to what karate is all about, and they get to class and they realize it's actually really hard work, lots of repetition. But I also think it largely has to do with the goals we set for ourselves, in that sometimes we set such lofty goals that we somehow get lost along the way in trying to achieve those. So my feeling is, and like we've discussed before, is that it's more about the process and enjoyment of striving towards those goals rather than ultimately reaching them, perhaps.
Okay. Well, that leads me to an interesting question. So a lot of people want to get into karate and become a black belt. Do you find a lot of people dropping out once they achieve their black belt, or by then has the discipline kicked in that they carry on with their karate and keep moving along with it?
I think for probably the majority of people, achieving that black belt does spur them on to continue their training, because we have this belief in karate that first dan or shodan is actually the beginning of one's training. But unfortunately, there are those students who, when they achieve that first dan or shodan, they unfortunately do stop training because they feel maybe they've reached the pinnacle of the discipline, which is really sad, because after 5 to 8 years of training, not to follow through and push oneself a bit further is really sad. So yes, unfortunately it does happen.
I think we see that with a lot of people where they're more fixed on the destination than the journey, and I think that's a similar type of thing. Once karate becomes a lifestyle. It's not about what belt you're wearing when you go to training. It's actually about showing up, and disciplining and practicing the art.
Yes, I agree with that.
So one of the things I noticed when I was, or leading up to my breakdown, I started feeling very overwhelmed with everything in life. For the people watching, if you could give them a piece of advice, if people are feeling overwhelmed, or maybe in the karate sense, if somebody has failed a grading and want to give up, what advice could you give somebody to maybe encourage them or motivate them to stand up and dust off, go again?
Well, I think failure in any aspect of one's life can be particularly difficult, but I think we also have to acknowledge the role failure plays in us actually making further progress in life. So my advice to students would possibly be to try and maintain one's training, even when it's really difficult. Those are the times where I think you have to be completely mindful of your situation, and perhaps not lose sight of the reason for having started something in the first place. So I would really encourage people to make the most of failure, as difficult as that may be. Because our failures, I think, define us as people as much as success tends to define us in life.
I like that. Don't lose sight of what you originally set out for. Very often we get so focused on the failure that we forget why we're on this journey anyway. Invisible traps. What invisible traps should our listeners look out for and try to avoid?
Well, I think going back to what we've just discussed, I think never lose sight of why one starts something in the first place. And I think there's a good reason why people see value in terms of starting something like karate, but in the chaos of life, sometimes it's easy to lose sight of the true reason for starting something. So I believe we all go through times where it's really difficult to make time for extra things like karate practice, but that's when we really have to be vigilant and try and somehow maintain a sense of why we started and what we really hope to achieve by continuing. So I believe firmly in not giving up.
And a couple of your sort of warrior hacks that you can share with us, things that you've learned from karate that we can apply in everyday life.
Well, I think my philosophy is quite simple, and that's to try. I try my best to uncomplicate my life as much as possible, and to keep things very, very simple, which then allows me the time to concentrate on what I deem to be important. But I think from a personal perspective, this is essential for my own well-being, is to be able to cancel out all the additional noise if that's possible.
And it shows in your house there is no clutter that's going on. It's a very,
Thank you.
very zen, organized house. And one of the things that has been really remarkable for me, when I started training, I was one of two adults in a class with a whole lot of young kids, and the kids are often, I don't want to say undisciplined, they're often rowdy, and they're just being kids, they're all over the place. And however, as they start moving through the levels and they move from white belt to yellow belt to orange belt, there's a transformation that happens with the children, and I experienced that transformation myself. In your experience, what do you do that transforms people?
That's really a good question, and I think the answer lies probably in the discipline within the system, or the benefits one can be had through training in karate. And I think it's very, very systemized in terms of the way in which it's delivered to students. So it's always challenging, but at the same time, it gives people the opportunity to progress. So I think in my role as an instructor, I'm really just facilitating that process. I think we really have a wonderful opportunity to learn and grow through the practice of karate. So I think in that respect, it's truly good for self-discovery.